Our video today is all about parameters. So what are parameters? First, we need to think about how we define our functions. So functions are usually categorized into families. So for example, first degree or linear functions, sine functions, quadratic, those are all things we've worked with so far this year. And the most basic version of any family of functions is our basic function. So an example of that would be for a first degree polynomial, the most basic would be y equals x. That's our very basic function. And we can transform any basic function by modifying certain values. We call these values parameters. So we know that not every line has an equation like this. We're actually used to seeing the parameters for that type of family of function. And we're going to talk about, in general, what do parameters look like. So if we're talking about a function f, it can be transformed by doing different operations. Okay, so when we're looking at this, it probably looks a little bit crazy, but a, b, h, and k are what we call our parameters. So I'll write this down here. A, b, h, and k are parameters. They are numbers. Okay, so we would be filling in actual number values for a, b, h, and k. And what we're looking at in this video and the next couple of videos is what happens when we change these individual parameters. What effect do they have on our function? So if I take my function f and I multiply it by something, so if I change my value of a, what will happen to the appearance of my function? That's what we're going to be looking at today. So what we have here is a table of different families of functions, what their basic function looks like, and just a single example of a modified or a transformed function where the parameters have been changed. And what we'll be looking at over the next little while is how can we identify what parameters are there and what parameters have been changed. And this is a table we're going to keep coming back to as an example of how we can manipulate that family of functions. So our first degree polynomial, like I said before, y equals x. That's our most basic rule. This is an example here of a modified linear function. So 7x minus 3. And we know here that this would be our rate of change. This value would be our intercept. So we actually have a pretty good idea already of what happens when we modify those parameters for a line. We have second degree polynomial. Our basic is y equals x squared. Okay, and this is an example here of a modified second degree polynomial. Okay, so we have three different parameters here. And each of those parameters is going to change somehow the appearance of the graph of this function. So there's going to be a change from y equals x squared to our new function g of x with all of these changed parameters. So we have a lot of different families of functions here, and not all of them we've spent a lot of time with before, in particular the two that have arrows. We're really going to talk about those a lot in a lot more detail in the next couple of chapters. So if you don't recognize all of these functions right now, that's okay. It's just to get a chart, something to refer back to all the time so that we always know what our standard form here is and what happens when we insert parameters and we change the values of those parameters.